Hey everybody, welcome to World History. Also, welcome to At Home Edition. Due to weather, I am completely snowed in at my apartment, so welcome to my home office, something you may have seen before. So, today's section, this entire lesson, is primarily focusing on the buildup of the annihilation of the Jewish people in Europe. So, fair warning, content warning for all three sections today. There is some pretty deep material. If this is too much for you, feel free to turn the video off and come back to this later when you are in a better mindset and are able to handle the content being discussed. So, in terms of what we got on the docket for the whole lesson today, we're going to do our opening activity in a moment. We're going to do section 1 and activity 1 on this video, so flashover and the picture analysis. The second video will include lecture number 2 for looking at the camps and a graphic organizer as your activity, where the third video will include the partisans and resistance and the final assessment. Our overall learning objectives for today are to examine the developments that accelerated the rate of destruction in 1942 and 1943, and by extension 1944. We're going to identify the major killing centers used by the Nazis. We'll continue to analyze quotes and primary sources from the period to develop a greater understanding of the materials being studied. We'll examine the use of terror in the killing centers, and we'll analyze the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So, let's start with our opening activity. This is a types of camp refresher. Take a minute, look back at your notes from the week 4 lesson in lecture number 3. We identified the different types of camps. Take a couple of minutes with the people at your table or individually if you'd like, and write a definition for each one in your own words. We will then discuss as a class and create a class definition. I've included the list of the 5 camp types that we identified previously. That way you have access to them here. As a reminder, those are concentration camps, labor camps, POW camps, transit camps, and killing centers. So let's get into lecture number 1, flashover. So, the peak years of killing Jews. The idea of the Jews disappearing, this was an idea that was present from the outset of Nazi rule. This was like from day one. In 1941, and we talked about this last time, we start to see the scale of operations start to expand. Along with that, this is due to the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. We see the rate of killing soar as the Nazis focus primarily on the Jews. They're going to adapt their approaches that they had used previously, as well as adding new ways to increase outputs or the amount of people being killed. This intensified violence did also change perceptions. People came to believe that anything they did to the Jews was permitted, and perhaps even a moral act. So, one of the people's experiences we'll talk about is Molly Applebaum. Now, she was sent into hiding with her cousin on a farm. This is her experience where she says there's a place on the surface of the earth for all living creatures. Sadly, there is no place on the surface of the earth only for 2 miserable, abandoned living creatures. So these 2 poor, miserable human beings are forced to live under the surface, squeezed in a small box where you can merely lie down and still feel cramped, and you can only dream about sitting. So take a minute, think about it. What do you take away from this quote? So, an interlocking process of destruction starts to begin in 1942. They've entered uncharted terrain. They're going to be guided by previous experiences, but a lot of scholars differ on when and how total annihilation was decided. One of those includes some say it was due to early victories against the Soviet Union, which they did have a lot of those. Others say it was due to military developments from later in the year. While it's important to note these are not mutually exclusive things, these both may have contributed to the destruction. Genocide was not the result of one decision, but an idea that became a reality as a part of this. Now, that's not to say they didn't face problems. By autumn 1941, some of the Germans' problems were from their own making. One of the largest ones being numbers. There were a large number of Jews in territories under German control. Remember, we've talked about the ghettos and a bunch of other experiences of these massive communities of Jews. Now, Typically, they're in the ghettos or labor camps. They're sick, they're starving, they're unable to work. So there are some additional problems. The first one being they further drain the food supply. Second one, they spread disease. And third one, especially young men, constituted a security threat. Now, efforts to solve this problem created more. An example would be the Rumbula massacre near Riga. In the fall of 1941, German police sent thousands of Germans, Austrian, and Czech Jews to the east to ghettos and camps near Riga, which, if I remember correctly, is in Poland. Now, in preparation, the SS officers that were already there began killing the Jewish population that was already there. That was 25,000 people. This includes all the Jews from Riga, and about 1,000 German Jews will be killed in this massacre. It also, well, they replaced the Jews from Riga with about 16,000 German Jews who would also later be killed. It's important to understand that this is a self-made problem for the Germans, and it involved efficiency. Now, they killed a lot of people in open-air shootings. Remember, we've talked about that a lot throughout this entire course. This method has drawbacks. It was porous, there were many people involved, so it wasn't easy to keep it a secret. Public violence served to intimidate subject peoples in the short term. In the long term, it risked alienating them further, and it was never complete. People tended to survive these mass shootings and then escape. It's also important to note that mass shootings at close range were labor intensive. They required a lot of weapons and ammunition, and each soldier could only kill one victim at a time, meaning it was a long, laborious process. It wasn't something that could easily be done. Many found the work to be physically and psychologically challenging and finished their shifts covered in blood. To make up for this, then that leads to massive consumptions of alcohol, rampant sexual assault, and a carnival atmosphere prevailing. Basically, people are like, oh, we don't got no rules. We can do whatever we want. Woo! Even though they're literally going and killing people every single day. Some did admit the job bothered them, especially when it came to killing children. Some members of the Einsatzgruppen admitted that they couldn't even bring themselves to touch their own children after killing Jewish children. Now, excuse me. Commanders also worried about the effects on the morale and discipline of their men. They did express concerns, not as a moral problem, but as a technical issue. They weren't looking out for the well-being of their troops, nor were they looking out for the well-being of the Jews. They were like, who cares? So this leads to some obvious solutions. We've kind of already talked about a couple of these. In 1941, Heinrich Himmler asked Reinhard Heydrich, who we talked about last time, with determining the final solution, aka the Wannsee Conference that we talked about last week. And from Lessons of Destruction, they look specifically at the destruction of Soviet POWs. The combination of death by neglect, starvation, and disease with direct killing proved potent. And it wiped out more than 2 million lives in 6 months. They also would develop a system of sorting victims into those that were able to work and those that were to be killed immediately. That's where a lot of these common elements are going to start to come from. One of the major examples is Galicia. This is a region under Soviet control until the summer of 1941. 200,000 Jews are going to be rounded up and that lived in the city of Lviv, which was a major city. And it unleashed a wave of violence that evolved into a system of negative triage. Jews were divided into 3 main groups. You had your skilled workers and artisans, your laborers, and your superfluous people. AKA the superfluous ones were the ones that were being killed. This included people with disabilities, children, mothers, the weak, sick, and old. Along with this, if you remember from a while ago, we talked about those euthanasia programs, T4. It served as a strong training ground, and leaders were sent from the euthanasia programs to run the camps, specifically at Belzec, Sobibor, and Treblinka, camps we'll talk about in the second part of this lecture. In terms of experiences, Jewish men were more likely to be killed in 1939 and 1940. More women would be sent to the death camps in 1942. In Auschwitz specifically, men had a better chance of being selected for work, while women were more likely to be killed. By the end of the war, this shifted, though, because young men were considered to be dangerous and a security threat. So one of the things we have to talk about before we get into the killing centers is the convergence of experiences between the East and the West. So in 1942, the experiences of Jews in the East and the West start to converge. Jews in the West were now being sent to the transit camps. But it's also important to note, at this point, Jews in like Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia had not been sent to the ghettos, nor they were now being sent to the same transit camp ghettos in the general government that Polish Jews had been in for years. Starvation and disease will take a heavy toll before even killing with gas was ready at Belzec. Looking at Slovakia specifically, this is the first of Germany's partner states to hand over their Jews in their jurisdiction. And they paid Germany 500 marks per Jew to basically get rid of them. And they would pay a little bit extra if that meant taking their children as well. In the Netherlands and France, it's a really unique experience because going into 1942, they were still living in their own homes. They hadn't been confined to ghettos. They didn't have to start wearing the Star of David until halfway through 1942. Transports will begin in July of that year from the Netherlands to killing centers. And at the same time, about 13,000 French Jews are confined to a sports arena in Paris. So it's important to note, by 1942, the West is starting to experience a lot of the same experiences that Eastern Jews have been experiencing since 1939 and 1940. Another big thing that comes into play is ghetto liquidation, or the shutting down of the ghettos. Now, you might think of the grander concept liquidation, that's the financial term. It means to liquidate or sell your assets. Well, it's anything but a financial decision. It typically involves mass violence. The SS would separate families, choose laborers, and then send the rest to be killed. Often they had the Jewish police and Jewish leadership helping this process as well. It did also have a material side to it. People used it to take any remaining property and possessions from the Jews. They burned down buildings, they took property for themselves. Non-Jews in the area typically had one of two predominant responses if they knew of the impending liquidation. Some warned Jews, allowing them time to escape or find hiding places for their children. Others grabbed the chance to steal stuff before the Germans did. So the violence is starting to escalate. We're going to see a lot more of that when we do section 2. So we're at the end of notes for section 1. Here's your knowledge check for this section. Consider the following. How did the experiences of Jews in the East and the West begin to converge? Highlight some similarities and differences between their experiences. Take a couple minutes. We'll talk about that in a moment. But for the sake of the video, there's sources used. That should be a couple more slides down. But let's talk about activity number 1 first. So you're going to complete the worksheet posted on Google Classroom. You will analyze 3 separate primary images and answer the following questions. What is the image depicting? What emotion do you feel looking at the image? And what does this represent to you? The images you're going to analyze depict a pile of wedding rings at Buchenwald and prayer shawls and suitcases at Auschwitz, which we'll talk more about Auschwitz in the second video for today. Now, for the sake of ending the video on the right note, here are the sources that were consulted for the development of this section of the lesson. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, guys.